Welcome and thank you for joining us today for Security Analytics and Big Data, what you need to know. My name is Raleigh Gould and I'll be your moderator for today's event. Our featured speakers are David Monahan, Research Director, Risk and Security Management at EMA, Samir Nori, Senior Product Marketing Manager at MapR Technologies, and Nick Amato, Director of Technical Marketing at MapR Technologies. David's in-depth security experience, which spans over 15 years, has included organizing and managing physical and information security programs. Samir has over 10 years of experience in the technology industry in marketing, pre-sales, and consulting with domain experience in business intelligence, analytics, and big data. And Nick works with the MapR ecosystem and technology partners to identify new opportunities where the MapR platform can bring value to its customers. And before I hand things over to our featured speakers, I did want today's audience to know that you can log your questions at any time throughout the course of the presentation by using the Q&A functionality located in the right-hand column of your screen. If we do not have an opportunity to get to your questions today, I will go ahead and send those on to the speakers so that those can be addressed for you. Also, today's event is being recorded, and you will receive a follow-up email from Enterprise Management Associates tomorrow that will include this on-demand recording, as well as the data-driven research report from EMA. So be on the lookout for that email. And now I'd like to go ahead and turn things over to our first featured speaker, David Monahan. David?
Thanks, Raleigh. I appreciate it. Welcome, everybody. Glad you could be here today. So we're going to talk a little bit today about some of the findings that EMA has had around security analytics and big data. And hopefully everybody will enjoy the conversation, and I think we have a lot of good data for you. I think one of the things that's important to bring out today, I think you're probably at least somewhat familiar with the fact that 2014 was the year of the breach, right? There's many, many things going on, 1 billion records lost to compromise of various types. And I think it's important to note that the mentality of hacking has changed over the last 2 years, especially if you look at the last decade. Hacking has changed. When hacking first started, people were more nuisance-oriented. I want to get my name on the Doritos bag or my logo on the can of Coke or whatever it was. You'd have things like that, or defacements were more motivated towards just the nuisance type of thing. But we have seen, especially in this last 5 years, that the attacks have been more financially motivated. We're seeing organized crime and other individuals going out there to try and steal data for some kind of compensation. We're also seeing a significant rise in the socio-political motivations around either nation-state hacking or significant altercations with their own governments within the countries and things like that. And lastly, we're seeing a significant rise in industrial espionage, which can either be from nation-state or competing entities trying to gather information to take away someone's competitive edge or increase their own competitive edge. Additionally, with that, we're seeing this across every industry. There's no one that has been immune. There's no one that's unique, and it doesn't matter whether it's healthcare, retail, government, education, food services. So no one is immune to data breaches and effects. If you have some kind of data, then someone's probably after it to be able to utilize it for their own purposes or, again, for some kind of monetary compensation. Organizations are being attacked from all sides. I think I've mentioned the primary groups as well, but it's not only external threats, but it's internal threats. If your organization has information, which we all do, that information is power. And the old adage that knowledge is power, I think, directly applies here. There's also another one that says money is power. And if we know that at this point that knowledge is money because people are going to grab it so they can use that to gain their additional compensation and edge. Any information out there is up for grabs if it's connected to some sort of network. The only thing that's even remotely safe is the stuff that you lock inside a safe, put inside concrete, and drop to the bottom of the ocean and have a boat that watches for it. We know that if you are connected to the internet, there are plenty of means for people to get to that information. Interestingly enough, last year, email was the most compromised. We have email addresses and email records that were compromised from numerous companies. Credit cards were the second most compromised types of records. Interestingly enough, PII, or personally identifiable information, it was the most valuable per record. A lot of that information was lost to various compromises, and we're seeing on the dark web or the dark net that particular information is very invaluable because it has more information about the individual and therefore can be used for a wider variety of impersonation and other attacks. Industrial and technical IP was also found to be very, very valuable as well. Some of the things that we've seen out there is identifying the threats, even though we believe that they're everywhere. Actually identifying them quickly and solidly is more difficult. We did some research last year for data-driven security, and we found that 69% of organizations said that they were only highly doubtful to somewhat confident they could detect an issue before it had become a big problem and caused significant impact. So more than half, right, almost 3/4 said we're not really sure that we can identify what these problems are before we lose data, have monetary loss, etc. Interestingly enough as well, 22% said they believe they are not, only 22% said they are consistent in successfully correlating security issues to business impact. I think that is another significant issue. If less than a quarter can actually identify once they've been attacked, what the business impacts of that attack were in terms of data loss, data compromise, and so forth, and let's say pervasiveness within their environment. That's not very good either. And lastly, on the bottom right there, you'll see we had 60% of organizations said they were unable to stop exploits because they had outdated or insufficient intelligence, specifically threat intelligence. And that's a lot about what we're talking today, because it's really key that we are able to find out what's going on in our environment very, very quickly and then be able to respond to them appropriately. An additional part of that research, you'll see in the graph on the bottom left, is top frustrations with IT practices. 41% said they were having too difficult of a time separating legitimate activities from malicious activities. And I think one of the key aspects of that is, since malware is a primary attack vector, once I click on a bad link and gain an infection on my system, I look like the bad actor. Or to put it another way, the malware on that will try to imitate me to be able to gain access to the data that I have permissions to access. So that creates a very difficult problem for security, because now malware looks like an insider, just doing their job, doing their normal thing, and yet ultimately it's really trying to gather information or identify and map out systems where information resides. I think one of the other key items is the inability to report meaningful information to stakeholders. That has always been a key issue because that's what drives financing and funding for a particular organization. Ultimately, if I can't tell my boss, this is how I'm helping the businesses I'm helping you, why are they going to give me money to be able to do that? So another key aspect of the tooling is to be able to get reporting out of the system such that we can show management how we're improving security, how we're reducing risk, and how that correlates to the bottom line of the business. Tools are another significant issue, as well as prioritizing remediation activities. We know that the common tools we have, and we're going to talk about a little bit more about SIM later on in the conversation, but we know that we're having difficulty using traditional SIM to prioritize because we can get a huge load of priority 1 alerts, and then it's back to a human intuition to be able to determine what we want to do there. So I mentioned that tooling is an issue, and I truly believe, based on the research that we have, that we do have to have better tools. The data volumes are too high. When we started talking to organizations about how much data they're collecting to try and do security, 45% are collecting more than 40 gigabytes a day, and almost 16% are collecting over 500 gigabytes a day of logs. We know that that's manually impossible to parse through, and even creating our own custom scripts and tooling is insufficient for that type of logging data to find the key items. Additionally, we're seeing that correlation and normalization as a primary tool are not sufficient. When we look at the number of alerts that we get, as I just mentioned a moment ago, with SIM, traditional SIM, we can get somewhere upwards of 100 to 1 or even more high priority alerts per person. So, and there's no way that a single individual can respond to that many alerts, so they have to go through and either take them as they come or actually review them manually and try and figure out how they're going to deal with that. So from that perspective, we have to have something that can give us a better context and or a better fidelity of data so that the systems can do better prioritization before presenting them to the analysts. Another interesting part of the study, we we worked was we found that operation analysts and responders do need that higher priority, and Ponemon supports this particular aspect as well. They did a study last year that identified that actionable intelligence has to be gained within 60 seconds to be able to significantly reduce the response time, but also the cost of the breach. So from that perspective, if they can get data to the analyst to be able to respond within 60 seconds, they can cut the cost of a breach by 40%. And that's a pretty amazing percentage if you think about it. But that time slice is very difficult to get to. If we think about in the past where we talked about real-time alerts and real-time alerting, especially from an outsourcing perspective, that was somewhere between 10 and 15 minutes. So that's 10 and 15x what we're really trying to get to. And today the tools have to be able to be that much faster and be able to parse through the data that much better to be able to get us actionable intelligence within 1 minute. And if they can do so, we can significantly affect the outcomes of that particular attack or breach. Additionally, we find that the persistent threats and their methodologies are becoming more and more difficult to detect. They're also expanding very rapidly in terms of the types of attacks. And we do know that most of them are formulated around social engineering and getting someone to click on the link, and whether that's via a phishing email of some kind or a targeted phishing email, whether that's a particular website, that's kind of immaterial at this point. The issue is that ultimately they're going to get you to click on something and get some kind of malware on your system. And I've listed out a few of the major malwares that came out, and there were hundreds of different types of significant malware. But I think these are some of the key ones that we want to look at in terms of the origins and what they did. So ultimately, we have things like Game Over and Zeus, which were botnets and malware that were identified to steal data from banking institutions. We've seen things like Crypto Locker and Crypto Wall, CTB Locker, and these were primarily meant to take over systems so that they could steal data. If you're not familiar with them, ultimately they encrypt the data, and if you don't pay the ransom, you don't get the key, and your data is locked forever. You also have the Dexter, Pause Logger, Black Pause, and so forth. There were a myriad of point-of-sale terminal malware that were introduced last year and accelerated, and some of the bigger events that we saw, such as Target and Home Depot, were victims of these types of malware, ultimately siphoning data off. Now, these were created by criminal organizations to be able to gather data for some sort of financial compensation. Below that, we also see where nation-states were involved in throwing balls back and forth. We had Stuxnet, which was a number of years ago. We have direct memory access video RAM malware, so now they can embed malware in various aspects of your system that have writable EEPROMs on them but aren't scanned by antivirus or other traditional endpoint systems scanning services. We have the Tailored Access Operations Group from NSA that was doing microprocessor embedded malware to gather information and to spy on individuals. Lastly, one of the most recent, which I think came out about 2 weeks ago, I think it was announced, was this NLS 933W. This was significant because it allows someone, once again, to inject malware into firmware, but this was on major hardware manufacturers for hard drives, and then ultimately, again, your system doesn't scan it, so it's persistent. When you reflash the machine and reboot it, this stuff will come back again and begin to siphon information. So unfortunately, the nation states are really teaching the criminals how to do it better, and we'll continue to see, I'm sure, these types of technologies being rolled over back into the criminal organizations. We know that Stuxnet has been reverse engineered and being used from criminal perspective. So unfortunately, the governments aren't really helping us very much by beating each other up. With talking to individuals about their key frustrations, the top three frustrations that we found with IT security technologies was, one, the lack of integration and operability. They found that data was still too siloed, technologies were still too siloed, and so these operators were having to go back and forth between different systems to figure out what was going on and to manually work the data. Now, SIM has been a big help in this particular area, but we're still finding people complaining significantly about this lack of integration or interoperability. Number two is the tools are unable to recognize emerging threats. We know that the attackers are significantly ramping up the speed at which they're modifying malware, modifying tools and attack vectors, and the tools on our side, on the defense side, are not able to keep up with that. And thirdly, the vendors are too slow to respond to emerging threats. So, and I think those two correlate very tightly because generally the vendors create the tools, but also I think that part of it seems to stem in conversations that a lot of people felt that vendors really weren't getting the big picture that they needed to expand their capabilities faster and figure out whether it's using a quality system or a waterfall delivery method or whatever it is, some sort of agile, to get their solutions updated and out faster. Because even if we're not talking about signature-based detections, when new attacks come out, you may need to modify how you're correlating events, how you're detecting events, and so forth beyond signatures. So I mentioned SIM earlier, the Security Incident and Event Management, or Security Information and Event Management. It's been a foundational tool for quite some time. It's been in the marketplace for probably about 12 years, maybe a little bit longer. And it is the core data repository for security events. Most organizations that have them will take as much information they get, they'll pump it in, and then the SIM ultimately is responsible for correlating and normalizing the information to help the analyst. The problem is that SIM often doesn't have enough context, and it definitely has not traditionally had the capability to do analysis. It's primarily rules-based or policy-based or trigger-based, however you want to phrase that, and then it doesn't understand behavior. So the analysis is limited to the direct information it gets. It compares IP addresses and host names and other information like that, and can relate those types of data, but it doesn't go outside those. And then when it alerts, it is based upon rules and triggers and correlations that are either created by the vendor and or added by the users, and so that becomes a limitation as well. Ultimately, when we look at that, the core issue behind SIM is it doesn't understand human interaction. It doesn't understand human behavior. So it doesn't understand how to be able to do, for example, statistical analysis and then anomaly detection around human behavior. So one of the analogies I like to use, if you're familiar with Sesame Street, they used to have little panels that said one of these kids is not like the others and he's doing his own thing. Well, SIM doesn't understand that. It understands it's getting information, but you need a higher form of analytics to be able to identify, oh, well, that's the kid with the frisbee, not the kid with all the the basketballs. And so a key area that we wanted to focus on in this research was how security analytics was different and how it improved their ability to respond. One of the other things that came up in the conversations with these individuals and in research was that people are doing a lot of manual investigations. 55% said, hey, based on the way we're able to gather information and the types of information that we're able to use, we still have to go back and do a manual post-event investigation. We don't have enough fidelity and to be able to remediate this initially. And that's a huge impact on those teams, especially if you think about, once again, 100 to 1 alerts, and then you're having to go back and do some kind of manual investigation around that. That creates a significant problem. So we said, well, given these issues that you're having, what types of features do you want to see? What do you think that you need to advance the capabilities of SIM into more of an analytic solution? And the first one they mentioned here is advanced automated response capabilities. And I want to make a differentiator here between automatic and automated, because I think that's key. Historically, when we've tried to do automatic response, let's say 10 years ago, when we started out with intrusion detection and prevention, and we said we want to integrate that with our firewall so we can stop someone from mounting some kind of attack. We found the issue was that we could be spoofed by an attacker and shut off one of our business partners, or there just wasn't enough, if there was a false alert, there wasn't enough confidence in it to be able to do that without potentially breaking something. And so automatic is not something that's desired because there's still not a lot of confidence in that. However, automated is, and that would be where I say, okay, I've identified an issue based on the information I have, and I want you to go do something and click the button or start the script or whatever the activity is, and then it will go do something based upon that analysis. So it has that human interaction in the middle before it actually gets going to be able to confirm analysis or confirm the response, and that's a key aspect. The second one is increased ability to easily aggregate and cross-analyze data from non-security sources. So originally SIM was log-based. You send it a message, it would do something with it. The SIM vendors have begun to respond in terms of collecting additional information, but there are still some issues and impacts on that. Not all of them can collect net flow information. Not all of them can collect various other types of logs that are non-standard, and most of them can't collect things like unstructured data out of HR records or things like that. And those could be very key to identifying whether somebody is actually attacking you or whether it's just an anomalous activity that should be monitored for further event. A good example of that would be if you have an employee who's gotten a bad rating from the insider perspective, and the system understands HR records, and those can be ingested and taken into context, and then they begin collecting a large amount of information. They say, okay, we need to go and have a chat with this individual because it looks like, one, they're behaving abnormally, and two, we have a context that says they may be disgruntled or some other issue is going on. The third one is the enhanced data visualization. Visualization is absolutely key in security analytics. Just having a graph doesn't necessarily do it. Right? You want to understand data flows. You want to understand volumes, relationships, and things like that. And so having the ability to look at visualizations and understand attack patterns and how the data move back and forth and what the timelines are, that's very, very key as well. All right, so we're going to have a polling question. So I'm going to hand back to Raleigh, our moderator, to hand this off to everybody.
Great. Thank you, David. We have 2 poll questions during today's event and hope that you will participate. The first poll question is, have you heard of security analytics or security intelligence as a solution? The options are have not heard of it, believe they are the same as SIM, deployed a security analytics solution, or considering security analytics in the next 6 to 12 months. The poll will be open just for about 10 seconds because we do have a lot of information to present today. While you're taking that poll, I did also want to mention that in the follow-up email, I mentioned this at the start of the presentation, but it will include David's data-driven security research report. So take a look at that. It has a lot of valuable information. We have just a few more seconds before we get the poll results, and then I'll hand it back over to Dave. Dave, the poll is now closed, and I'm going to hand it back over to you.
Thank you very much, Raleigh. It looks like we had roughly a third to half of everybody respond, and let's see, the vast majority are D, considering security analytics in the next 7 months. Or 6 to 12 months, excuse me. And then the other one that tied with that is the first one, have not heard of it. So I think this is a key aspect. So for those of you who are participating, if you haven't heard of security analytics, the one thing I will bring up is that the title security analytics is somewhat fluid. That's the title I've chosen, but you could have it listed as security analytics, or here we also listed as security intelligence. So as you begin to look around, you might also hear risk intelligence or risk analytics. But unfortunately, there's not a significant standardization within the marketplace right now. So you'll have different vendors that use similar names for different technology results, and you'll also have folks that use different names for the same. So unfortunately, it doesn't make it super easy to do that. But hopefully, if you're interested in something like that, you have someone you can work with, or our EMA can also help give you information about the organizations that are providing these types of services. And I just want to make sure that everyone understands that, because it is very difficult to maneuver through the information that's out there. So when you move to security analytics, when you're looking to move to security analytics, a couple of the key points here that you can get out of this in terms of the data. So first is context and fidelity, and there is a difference between context and fidelity. Context is more data points, so you can understand what's going on. Fidelity is having better base information, so that you can ultimately see the bigger picture as well. So one is just more data points. One is having access to the base data, such that it's not contextually changed or otherwise modified. Normalization, for example, is one way of removing certain aspects of fidelity. So in that process, you can lose details that you may need to go back to the root data. Reducing false positives is another one that's very, very key. And in fact, down at the bottom, as part of our survey, we found that 95% of the organizations that were using security analytics said they had been able to produce greater than expected value or expected value, and that's huge, because part of that is being able to reduce false positives. And then 90% said they were able to have a reduction in false positives and an improvement in actionable alerts. So from both of those perspectives, we've taken those 100 to 1 that we had before from a SIM perspective, and some of those probably went away. And then another aspect of them, because we have better context fidelity, we're able to reduce to a lower priority. So ultimately, we have a better gradation, and we know that, hey, we need to deal with this as well. So ultimately, that reduces our overall volume of alerts we have to deal with, and it provides that better prioritization to get to that final result, which is accelerated incident response. And all the things that we're doing are ultimately to get to a better means of responding and a faster means of responding, because as we talked about earlier, that 60 seconds, 40% reduction is huge. If we can do that, then we keep our names out of the paper, hopefully. So another slide about security analytics in terms of why organizations feel that they need these capabilities for advanced analytics, I think are important. So one, 53% recognize that it improves their defense against targeted threats. And since malware is the primary delivery mechanism, that's specifically going to help in that area. 46% it increases their operational efficiencies, which gets back to that incident response capability and able to deliver results better and faster. 43% said improves productivity and efficiently of the efforts, and then 36% said improves strategic decision making. That comes back to the ability to report and deliver that information back to the business stakeholders, ultimately driving business change and, as we mentioned earlier, budgets. So why do we need Hadoop for security Linux? Why is that useful to have this type of a tool? Well, again, the first thing was the volume of data. We mentioned that. Hadoop is specifically designed for processing large amounts of data. Okay. In that first bullet there, we asked folks, hey, would you collect more data if you could do something with it? And 66% said, yes, we would. We believe that there's more to do with the data, and we believe that there is more data to be captured. We just don't have the capabilities right now. Interestingly enough, you can see that only 10% said they didn't. So 10% of the folks said, we think we've got enough. We'll stick with it. But that's a pretty big variance. The second bullet, 57% of organizations said that they expect the greatest improvements in security come through data analysis from the innovations from vendors. And I think Hadoop specifically qualifies in this area. It is a fairly new technology overall, and especially in terms of its gain in the big data space. With that, Hadoop shows that, hey, we can take this data, very large, and not only large, but diverse information, and be able to apply intelligence to it to give the business an ability to deal with whatever it is. And we know that most of big data applications right now are in business intelligence and business analytics, so you can understand from a business perspective where there's process flow problems, where there's application problems, et cetera. But we're finding that security use cases can be very, very strong from a Hadoop perspective. So ultimately, as we look at this, we want to understand, again, both structured and unstructured data, how it can be applied to a security context, and then be able to provide the visualizations and the analysis that will help us to be able to respond. And the nice thing about Hadoop is it doesn't care what the format is of the data. You can do packet flows, you can do net flows, infrastructure logging, the HR records we mentioned before as well, endpoint information. You just keep adding data for that additional context, and Hadoop doesn't need to modify the fidelity in order to produce the results. And the last bullet I have there is 32% of organizations indicated they wanted to be able to analyze unstructured data. I think personally that number is going to go up as we renew this particular research for this year. I think we'll continue to see that to rise. Okay, a couple last points to make in terms of the benefits, right? It's purpose-built for processing the information. We've talked about that. Unstructured data, I think we've hit on that as well. Business analytics, I think from that perspective, this is an important context, because if you're already using some sort of Hadoop platform, or if you're considering a Hadoop platform for business analytics, why not leverage the same tool to get a higher ROI, return on investment, out of it, for being able to address security use cases? And in that case, you need to ensure that you've selected a tool that can best address the security needs as well as the business intelligence needs. So I think that's a key part of the analysis and the requirements driving for your organization. Because we can see down here, we asked the question that says, which of the following non-traditional data sources are currently not included or supported by your organization's SIM? And the first thing was machine learning tools. So there are tools out there that both generate and they also use machine learning to analyze information. And they said, well, this is not included in SIM. How do we get this in there? And machine learning, for those of you who are not familiar, quick overview, essentially is the capability of a system to adapt analysis based on inputs. And so it would be loosely related to artificial intelligence or something like that. And that's a much broader category, much more in depth, but just to give you an understanding. Additionally, fraud management systems, detection systems for your large banking organizations or other groups that deal with fraud. Business intelligence platforms. Well, there we go. We're integrating the two by talking about Hadoop as well as security analytics, and last, the enterprise data warehouses. So for the organizations that have these huge repositories, their SIM doesn't understand how to deal with that. So it's very important to them to be able to get that information and utilize it. So that's all the information we have from an analysis perspective. I hope you've been able to get some useful points out of this in terms of what you want to do for adopting new security analytics tools. And I will pass back over to Raleigh for a moment.
Thank you, David. It's actually Samir's presentation time. So Samir, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thanks, Raleigh. So I wanted to quickly, David, thanks for a great introduction and, context setting there, some great data points on, the trends in the space and, where things are headed. So I wanted to jump into, talking about a couple of customer examples to start off in terms of what customers are doing with MapR from a security analytics perspective. So this is a pretty widely deployed use case from a MapR perspective. And we see a fair amount of demand for this use case. So the first customer I wanted to talk about was Zions Bank. So Zions, for those of you not familiar, is a large regional bank based in Salt Lake City, and they service about 10 different states in the West. And their fraud operations and security analytics team is tasked with really sort of evaluating suspicious activity, detecting fraud, and being able to sort of, really provide, timely updates to the business in terms of what's going on with things in that area. So Zions, had an existing solution that they had built, on a prior platform, and which had been around for a number of years. But as they started to look at the scope and the volume of data that they had to deal with, they were looking for a newer platform to build, their sort of next-gen security analytics solution, if you will. And the reason for doing this was their prior infrastructure was starting to, get, hit into limitations in terms of what it could provide. So, David talked, a little bit about both sort of the volume and the variety of data just growing. And those are really sort of key drivers for where their existing platform, was not, scaling. Secondly, from a perspective of what they had to provide their business, they were just taking, a lot of time to go through, the data sets that they had. And in terms of doing business intelligence style reporting as well as, other analytics, it was just taking them longer to produce that information to the business. So they, they were looking at newer platforms. They looked at MapR and they, decided to go with MapR. So they're using, MapR as a critical piece of their sort of security analytics architecture, and really sort of two prominent use cases, if you will, are around detecting phishing behavior and payment fraud and being able to do this in real time. This is just a couple of the representative use cases. In terms of the business benefits they've been able to realize with MapR, so the first off is really their prior platform was based in some other older technology, and in terms of being able, if they had to continue working with that platform, they would have been looking at significant cost increases from a storage perspective to store just a larger amount of data. And so by going with MapR, they've seen their storage costs reduced by approximately 50%. On the other spectrum is where they're storing about a couple of years of data for them is about 1.2 petabytes of data. And in the past, on their prior platform, querying this used to take approximately 24 hours. So they've been able to go down to 30 minutes to query, about 2 years worth of data. That's, significant orders of magnitude improvement in terms of being able to query data and be able to, make that information available. And then lastly, but really sort of tying in back to what David was saying from a modeling and a statistical analysis perspective, they had existing models that they were running against small samples of data. Now, by having MapR and Hadoop-based solution, they're able to deploy these models against the entire set of data, and not be restricted to small sample sets. So as a result, they've now got much more increased model accuracy. And I think the quote from their head of fraud operations and security analytics sums it all, that they started off using MapR for information security, and now they're leveraging that for fraud detection as well. So just to give you a sense for a little bit of their architecture at a very high level, they've got a variety of different data sources coming in, sort of batch and real time as well, so transactional data, web server data, TCP, IP, so on and so forth. They use some other third-party tools for fraud detection, and then really from a MapR perspective, being able to ingest all of this data directly into the cluster without any special connectors or other applications to move it into the cluster is huge for them. They were able to run sort of both production development environments on the same cluster, and they did try doing this with another Hadoop distribution, but just didn't work for them. And so I think in terms of the technical benefits, they're really sort of leveraging all the enterprise-grade capabilities of MapR. And so I don't have time in this session to run through all of those. Definitely encourage you to visit our website and get a sense for our technical differentiators. But things like high availability, snapshots, performance, all key to enabling much more performance solution. And we already talked a little bit about the business benefits. They've got lower operating costs from an SLA perspective. They're a much happier place, and they're able to deploy their models much faster. Another customer I wanted to talk about is Solutionary. So Solutionary is a managed security services provider that provides managed security services and consulting services to their customers. And so they've had a growing customer base that was driving the need for them to process a lot more data, trillions of messages per year, and improving the granular level of granularity in their analytics and really leveraging more unstructured data sources. So similar sort of situation where they had an existing platform from an existing database, which was relational database oriented, and scaling that cost prohibitive and could not process data. So they've been able to replace that with MapR Enterprise Database Edition, which is our one of our 3 editions, and as a result have experienced 2x faster performance compared to competing solutions and alternatives that they looked into, and really sort of driving down the time to provide analytics to their customers. So they're really sort of both these examples sort of illustrate the fact that customers have had security solutions, but in order to scale it and take it to the next level, both from a data perspective as well as the type of analytics, they've really been able to leverage all that MapR has been able to provide. So just to sum it up at a very high level, there are different stakeholders, and for those of you in the webinar, either you fall into a business, technical, or operations camp. There's something that makes sense for all of you, right? So from a business perspective, you're really interested in detecting threats earlier, and getting a handle on unknown threats in particular, right? All with sort of a goal of being able to react faster, and avoid things like lawsuits, fines, obviously negative PR, right? David talked about not being in the news. From a technical perspective, I think really have a platform to build a variety of different use cases and solutions that you can address, right? And do both sort of historical as well as real-time analysis. And then from an operations perspective, low overhead, being able to easily integrate with your existing tool set, I think all are key. So just a really quick snapshot for those of you not familiar with MapR. Some of the advantages we provide. I've touched upon this a little bit, but really being able to scale across the enterprise. So features like multi-tenancy from a business continuity perspective, high availability and disaster recovery. From a speed perspective, we've definitely got benchmarks out there. We're 2 to 7x faster than other Hadoop distributions. We can support really fast, ultra fast data ingest, so up to 100 million data points per second. And with the rate of security data growing, this starts to become an important factor. Our sort of NFS and read-write file system, key differentiator for us. And really then from a query and analytics perspective, being able to sort of provide self-service data exploration capabilities and leveraging your existing BI tools to be able to leverage, take the process security data, but then be able to do reporting and analysis of it. And my colleague Nick will cover a little bit of this in his demo and in his talk. So I wanted to transition to the next poll question, and back to you, Raleigh.
Great. Thank you, Samir. Our final poll question for the day is, do you use Hadoop for security analytics? The options are no, didn't know it could be used for security analytics. Yes, it's been 6 months or less. Yes, it's been deployed for 12 months or more. Or no, but you're considering it in the next 6 to 12 months. Again, this will be a pretty brief poll because there is a lot of information to provide all of you today. I will once again also mention that you will be receiving a follow-up email from EMA tomorrow. I do highly recommend that you check that out. I mentioned you'll get the data-driven research report. There will also be some additional resources from MapR that I think you will find beneficial, so I do highly recommend that you check that out. Now the poll is just about wrapped up, and Samir, it is closed. I'm going to hand it back over to you.
Thanks, Raleigh. So the results were, interestingly, so about 23% of you didn't know that Hadoop could be used for security analytics. Some of you have actually deployed it, and some of you are considering it. About 12% or so are potentially considering looking at it, investigating it in the next 6 to 12 months. So it's sort of I think the interesting take is that Hadoop is starting to become a pretty important use case from a security analytics perspective, and we're definitely seeing that trend in the market. So I wanted to quickly segue into we recently announced a few different quick start solutions built on top of the MapR distribution, and I really wanted to one of them is focused on security log analytics and security analytics, and so. What we've really done with our quick start solutions is really package together, software, professional services, and training and certification into an easy consumable package. So really, what you get in a quick start solution is 6 nodes of one of the editions of MapR software, a 2-week professional services engagement that really is focused on helping you get up and going with a security analytics solution. And key to that is a solution template that we've built around security and log analytics, which my colleague Nick will talk about from architecture perspective and what that enables. So really pulling together the best of our professional services team and our data scientists and data engineers, and leveraging what we've learned from implementing with other customers, but also then some innovation and IP in that area. And then lastly is the training and certification aspect to help you get up and going with Hadoop and being able to deploy it. So the quick start engagement, like I talked about, is really focused on 3 pillars, if you will. So we've built a solution template that leverages both tools in the Hadoop ecosystem and beyond to get you up and going with a security solution. So the 2-week engagement will help you walk you through identifying things like the data sources at play, what are the transformations, helping you get trained on the template, but being able to also customize this to your organization's specific requirements, which is key. And then really sort of a blueprint document that would enable you to take the starting of a solution and take it all the way through production. So very quickly, some of the components of the solution template, there are really sort of 3 key areas. One is around data processing and workflows, right? So being able to read and collect input data from a variety of different sources. And so, Nick will talk about this and show you a demo of what we've done with, in this area. But really then, from a perspective of being able to handle a variety of different data types and data flows, if you will, so being able to handle sort of both bulk load as well as, streaming data are 2 use cases that we've addressed in sort of our initial rollout. There's a parsing and enrichment piece. So being able to process the input data and storing it in one or more types of data types of formats. So getting, data into Hadoop and MapR is really what we're trying to simplify, and really being able to help you get up and going with that. So then the data is then readily available for analysis, visualization, and other analytics. And then lastly, what's included in the solution template is also a couple of machine learning models to help you get started. So a couple of the examples in terms of the techniques are clustering analysis and reservoir sampling analysis. Nick will allude to a little bit more details on these. So really quickly, just to sum up on my end, for those of you not familiar with the MapR distribution, this is a snapshot view of the architecture of our distribution. So we packaged together all the different open source components and libraries, and then we've also innovated on a number of different areas when it comes to the file system as well as in Hadoop NoSQL database. And my sort of last slide is really just to get you a sense for MapR as a company. We've been top ranked by Forrester as top ranked Hadoop distribution, as well as sort of top ranked in NoSQL database. As a company, we're experiencing very high growth. We've got a number of customers, 700 plus customers in a variety of different verticals, and we're funded by some of the premier venture capitalists in the world. So with that, I will hand it over to Nick to talk about the security log analytics solution template and then jump into a demo.
Excellent. Thank you, Samir. So just to recap a little bit about what you heard from Samir and David as it relates to what I'll show you, Hadoop is really the ideal platform for addressing what was not possible with the previous generation of security tools like SIEM. And this is things like ingesting and analyzing data from both security and non-security sources, doing more real-time analysis, dashboarding, looking at things as they come in, enhancing the results that you get, maybe with BI tools like Tableau, and so on, things like that, and doing all of this at scale with commodity hardware. So this is an overview of the architecture of the MapR Quick Start solution template for security log analytics. And what this solution gives you is the ability to get started very quickly ingesting, parsing, and enriching all of the data sources that you might want to get into Hadoop, both security and non-security data sets. So you can get that next level of analysis beyond what your traditional tools might be giving you. So on the left side of the diagram, we have things like firewall logs, server logs, application logs. This can also be other types of data coming from elsewhere in your company. MapR makes this very easy to ingest into Hadoop and start parsing and processing it for machine learning, analytics, things like that. And starting with MapR as a Hadoop distribution specifically gives you a lot of advantages in terms of what you'll need building a solution around security analytics down the road. So this is things like the ability to get data into the cluster over NFS, having application consistent snapshots, being able to mirror the data maybe from an operational cluster to another cluster that's more for analytics, and so on. I won't go into all of these in detail in the demo, but with this quick start solution, you know that down the road, you can scale to a production deployment very easily. So I'm going to show you how we can take some raw data from, say, a syslog and build a dashboard from it in Kibana. Let me share my screen here. So on the left side of the screen, I have a couple of shells on my Hadoop cluster. On the right side of the screen, I have actually an interface to a full Kibana Logstash Elasticsearch stack, otherwise known as the ELK stack. Probably a lot of you are familiar with this. So I'm going to show you how you can actually start taking some of your log data, that you might have in your organization, and you might have this coming from hundreds or thousands of machines. And I can show you how we can actually get started ingesting that into Hadoop. So, for example, I have a log file here. This is an example syslog data file that I have. As you can see, this is very unstructured. It's basically unstructured text that comes in, and it doesn't follow any particular format. This is also very high volume data that comes in many lines at a time, and especially if it's coming in from large numbers of machines, ingesting this and making sense of it is very difficult. And this is one thing that Hadoop and this quick start solution can really help you get started with. So that's what my Linux syslog file looks like. Now, to start ingesting this data, I'm going to actually, we've implemented this concept called a hot folder. So to make it very easy to get my log data into Hadoop, I have this folder that I'm going to create that's constantly watched. And once I put data into that folder, the framework will actually kick off the MapReduce and Spark jobs to do parsing and enrichment, as well as do some unsupervised machine learning on the files to build a dashboard that I can use to detect things in real time. So the way this works is I have some parameters I can edit here. The first one is this properties file that contains several things that I can edit. In this case, I'm going to set it up to ingest syslog data. And you can see that this is built with some regular expressions that I'm going to add. This allows the framework to be very flexible. I can ingest log data, I can ingest syslogs, I can ingest other types of semi-structured or unstructured data into the platform using this configuration. So in this case, I'm going to be using syslog, and that's built with this patterns file. And this is very customizable. You can see that I've entered some regular expressions here to match different patterns that show up in different types of data sets. In this case, we're going to be using syslog again, and you can see that this is built using some different regular expressions that match parts of the syslog file and allow me to parse and enrich that data. So once I've configured this to ingest the type of data that I'm looking for, I'm going to go over, I'm going to start this folder watch service. And what that does is it implements this hot folder that allows me to just copy over data into the folder, and it will kick off, basically a couple of things will happen. It will kick off a MapReduce job to parse that data into Parquet format. And for those of you who are familiar with Parquet, you'll know that it's very flexible. If you're not familiar with Parquet, definitely check it on the web. It's a format that you can use to make this data very easy to use. You can drill down into it with BI tools. You can use it with this elk stack that I'm going to show you here. But ultimately, we're putting this log data, we're taking it from a less structured format and putting it into Parquet so we can make sense of it. So you can see I've started this folder watch service, and it's watching this particular folder. So to get this kicked off, I'll copy over my data files. Into that folder. You can see once I copied it, it's going to start the MapReduce job on the Hadoop cluster automatically for me. And it's actually going to run a couple of different jobs here to parse the data, enrich it with current tracking information, and then finally it will run a Spark job that will do some, in this case we're doing like a k-means clustering that will detect some of the anomalies in the log file. And the interesting thing about this is that I don't need to know much about the log file in advance. In fact, I don't even really need to know what I'm looking for. One of the really advantageous things about doing machine learning on log files is that it will start to detect things that are anomalies just based on its own structure. It can learn what's typically expected in your log files coming in, and then alert you to things that you want to know about that aren't expected. So you can see this last part is kicking off, and it's running the Spark job. So the next thing I'm going to show you after this finishes is how to get more value out of this data that I just ingested by building a simple dashboard. So on the right side of my screen, you can see this is finished here. On the right side of my screen, I've got an interface into Kibana. And this is now going to look at the data that I just parsed. So I've got a saved dashboard here that I'll load. So you can see just in a couple of seconds here, really, I've gone from having these big unstructured log files to being able to visualize things that are happening in the files. So I can look at my syslog entries by type, by minute, where they're coming in. I can look at the top hosts and top users in the file. Now, let's say I want to add some of the results of the anomaly detection to this dashboard. Again, it's very easy. I can just add a terms panel here. I can call it anomalies detected. I can just look at the anomaly type in the files that I've ingested. So you can see here I've just added a panel to the dashboard showing the anomalies that I just detected in my log file from k-means clustering. And it's already detected that in this log file there are too few entries of a certain type that I expect. So I could add another panel here to drill down on this a little bit more. and this could give me, say, more details about what's actually in the file. And so let's see, I've got this showing up in my panel here. I could just drill down on it a little bit. And now I can see that we've gone from taking this less structured log file here, and you can see the format here that it's parsed it into. It's made it very easy to make sense of. So I've got a couple of these anomalies detected, and I can actually see, for this particular instance, I've got too few cron entries for this machine coming in, and the other one is too few postfix entries, which is my mail daemon. So fewer entries are than expected are coming in at that time. So this is just an example of, you can see how quickly I went from ingesting all of this data that I might have coming in very quickly to being able to build an analytics dashboard and being able to make sense of that data. Okay, there are a few additional resources on our website, as Raleigh mentioned earlier. We have a new research report that highlights some of the ways big data and machine learning enable advanced security analytics. It goes into some of the more detailed areas. This is called the Evolution of Data-Driven Security. It's available for free on our website. We recently also published a solution brief around some of the aspects of the Quick Start solution that we just showed you. That very digestible format that you can read and get familiar with the solution. And one thing MapR just launched recently, and this is very exciting for those of you who are interested in learning more about how Hadoop works and learning more applications and how you can bring value to your business. MapR is really the only Hadoop vendor doing this at a large scale. We just launched a $50 million offering in free on-demand training. So all you need to do is go to the website and register, and there are various certification tracks that you can enter on the site. And these are very high quality technical training tracks that allow you to become really an expert in the different technology areas of Hadoop, things like HBase, MapReduce, and learning how to use Hadoop to get things done. So this is all done at mapr.com/training, and it's live now. You can go in and register and get trained. Okay, I think we're right at almost at the top of the hour here. I will hand it back to Raleigh. I think we can possibly take some questions, or it looks like we're just about out of time.
Yes, I think we have time for 1 or 2 questions. Again, you can log those using the Q&A panel. If we don't get to them now, I will send those on for you. So let's start with the first question. Nick, this may be a good one for you. It's product specific. I have ArcSight deployed in my environment. Would your solution work with ArcSight?
Yes, we are compatible with ArcSight. There are various ways that the solutions can interface. Definitely we would have to consult with you to see what specifically your needs are and what kind of solution you're building. But the two solutions are compatible. We do have customers using the two together. So that's a definite yes.
Okay, great. And let's just take one more question. I'll throw that out. I'll throw this one out there for whomever wants to answer it, is where does security log analytics on Hadoop fit within the spectrum of security solutions? Prevention, detection, or incident response?
I can take that one. This is Dave. So I think it actually can fit in either, and the key aspect is going to be how quickly the information is brought to bear. So if you can do it in real time, you can get to the point of preventing, or at least preventing, the expansion of attack. You definitely are in the area of response and detection. I mean, since we're putting logs in and we're detecting and analyzing what's going on, absolutely fits very well in that space. And then ultimately, again, speed defines how quickly and how fast you can provide response. But I think it easily fits within the detection response areas, and it can move upwards of the prevention area. Nick or Samir, either one of you want to comment?
No, I absolutely agree, Dave. That is absolutely right on the money.
Great. Well, we are just now at the top of the hour. I want to thank everyone for taking time out of your schedule to join us. We greatly appreciate it. And as I've mentioned several times, I'll mention one more time in closing that you will receive an email from EMA tomorrow that will include the data-driven research report and some of the MapR resources that Nick mentioned in his presentation. So be on the lookout for that. Thank you again for joining us, and enjoy the rest of your day.